sweet the sound. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. I left out the second line, that saved a wretch like me, because I wanted to say something very quickly about that. This hymn was written by John Newton in January of 1771. John Newton lived a sinful life. He was associated with slave trading. He is known to have been a drunkard at times. And the second line, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. When the New Century Hymnal was being created and published by the United Church of Christ, they tried to clean that up and make it amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved and set me free. And there were some folks within the United Church of Christ who would have no part of that. I have no part of that. And John Newton would have not had a part of that, because he was at a time lived a wretched life. And he had a conversion, became more of a preacher. The story in our gospel lesson that Gerry read this morning is also about someone who had lived a wretched life, but not of his own doing. A man born blind. I can't imagine. It simply gives me fright beyond the telling to imagine living that way. And then William Nicholson was so fascinated with the writer and author and C.S. Lewis, they wrote a play about Lewis's life that has something to do with seeing. This play is called Shadowlands, and it was turned into a really neat movie quite a while ago. But I go back to this story because it's still relevant. The play was also made into a movie in 1993 and is available online if you'd like to see it. In addition to being about C.S. Lewis's life, the play is also about a woman named Joy Davidson. The play is about their life together. But before they got together, before they fell in love and got married, and then had to deal with Joy's illness and death, Nicholson wrote about Joy. As a visitor from the U.S., she had read many of C.S. Lewis's books and found them very helpful in her life, especially as a source of healing, a source of light for trouble and painful and sometimes wretched time back in the U.S. Lewis has a very comfortable and settled life, living with his brother in Oxford and teaching. He might be described as rather set in his ways. Joy Davidson, on the other hand, as she is visiting England, attends a lecture given by Lewis, and the two meet at a discussion session at a lecture. And at first, Joy is rather cautious about taking too much of Lewis's time. But it seems that the author is quite taken with her, quite attracted to her, actually, and Joy's quite interesting and also holds her own as a very capable participant and conversationalist in these discussions with Lewis and the other professors. And in some ways, it seems that Joy has a hidden agenda as she asks Lewis about the sorrows of his life, about some of the dark times in his life. As he shares some of his story, Joy gains the courage to share a rather vivid account of her time, a time in her life, living in a painful tension between the shadows and the light. A powerful turning point from the shadows to the light, a time when living in the tensions deepened her faith. Joy's marriage to her husband is falling apart and she's nearly coming apart herself. At this point in the play, and in the midst of her helpfulness, she begins to describe a presence, a light, really, and that came to reassure her, which forms the basis of a confident truth that she discovered. Right out in the shadows into the light, Joy Davidson finds a path toward healing, toward a deeper faith, guided from the shadows by a seeing eye God. She is being led toward a new love, a new relationship, a new future. Imagine the idea, though, of a seeing eye God. God beckons us to trust our way into the future, relying on God's sight, even when we do not clearly see what the outcome might be. Even when we see causes for fear for all too clearly. Certainly in these times, in these days, our fear of isolation based on the awful reality of coronavirus impact on our lives, lost jobs, illness, death for some. More and more living in the shadows, it seems. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. I was born blind, but now I see, the man says to Jesus, to the people, to the worshipers of Moses and the God of Moses. These words of the blind man in our gospel lesson this morning come from one who had not seen the light ever. For he was born blind. He trusted the gift of light, the gift of the healing touch, the gift of a guiding hand that walked with the seeing eye Christ into an uncertain future. Uncertain for sure, full of fears, yet because he could see, full of hope. You'd be interested in knowing that C.S. Lewis and Joy Davidson eventually walked hand in hand, guided by a faith given them by God into a future of love and a relationship. It is reported that on their wedding night, as they returned to Lewis's home, that where he had lived with his brother, being rather nervous, said to his new wife, "I don't know how to do this." Maybe some of us have felt that upon marriage or upon a commitment to a relationship. And with great gentleness, she said to him, "Do whatever he always did to get ready for the night of sleep and rest. Just do the things you always do. But this time, I will be waiting for you." Out of the shadows into the light of a new and loving relationship. God beckons us to trust our way into the future, my friends, to relying on God's sight, even when we do not clearly see the outcomes, even when we see causes for fear are too clearly. The blind man could see again because he trusted Jesus to show him the way. No one will be there to lead him to safety, he thought. But the story of Jesus' healing of the blind man, and with Paul's admonition to take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, I am challenged to see and believe in the seeing eye God, the one who only desires light and love and goodness for me and for you. Indeed, what does it mean to believe in this seeing eye God? What does it mean to believe that God beckons us to trust our way into the future, relying on God's sight? Perhaps it means that we continually hold our eyes open to the possibility that God will use any means, maybe even us, maybe even little me, to do extraordinary acts of love and mercy and healing and justice. It also means, I think, that unlike the Pharisees in this gospel lesson, who just couldn't get their head around this love and this healing of Jesus, they kept reverting back to their archaic, way outmoded image of Moses as God. And when we are led out of the shadows into the light, and we celebrate it with excitement rather than skepticism and doubt, it means believing that God can change the most hopeless circumstances into the opportunity for seeing with God's eyes. It means trusting that the people of this community of faith will always come together to help open each other's eyes, to see in a new way what God has for us in the future. Right out of the shadows and darkness of a painful love relationship, Joy Davidson finds a path toward healing, toward a deeper faith. Guided from the shadows by a seeing eye God, she was led toward a new love, a new relationship, a new faith, a new future, and was the man born blind from birth. You want to sing with me? Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. In the name of Christ, may that be so for you this day. Amen.